Good evening and welcome back to Sports Talk ATL. I am Chase Earl, joined by Alex Lord. We start off today's show with the Atlanta Hawks. There are a lot of trade rumors swirling, and they've kind of all accelerated since the injury to Jalen Johnson being season ending was announced. What do the Hawks do? They don't really have the option to tank, guys, but it does look like it's becoming a clear picture. They want to get better in some areas, but the idea of doing that with Clint Capella and Bogdan Bogdanovic doesn't look likely. It seems like they are likely. They've been in trade rumors for 3-4 years, kind of like John Collins was before he was finally dealt. They've done plenty of good things for this organization, but they're on expiring deals, or they just feel like it's the end of the road for Bogey and Atlanta. It certainly feels like both of those guys will be shipped out, but they're not necessarily just selling. They want to remain competitive, and a name Brian Windhorst brought up to keep an eye on is the Hawks and Brandon Ingram.
Yeah, it seems like they want to trim the fat and, just get leaner. They're not ready to give up because there's no incentive to just give up because you alluded to it. We don't own our first round pick. So tanking doesn't help anyone but the San Antonio Spurs. It certainly doesn't help your cause to keep Trae Young in Atlanta to sign another contract extension, which I think he's going to end up doing. I think that the idea of buying and selling is good. Trimming some of the guys that, you really – Clint Capella is an expiring deal. You're not going to bring him back. You already gave Onyeka Okongwu money. He's the future at that position. Clint Capella has got to be moved in any capacity whatsoever. Get something in return for him because you got Onyeka in the starting lineup. Behind him, Larry Nance. That's a fine center duo. And even more than that, the Bogey thing, you said it. I was going to say it, that it reeks of John Collins. Like, we are going to hold on too long. We should have got rid of him last year. We could have gotten, maybe 2 first-round picks for him last year. And we might be lucky to get 1 first-round pick this year for him. So you don't want to continue to hold an asset that is depreciating. And when you think about a depreciating asset, Bogey's knees are depreciating assets. Like, that guy's knees are not going to get better. They're not going to appreciate. That guy is 32, but is the body of a 39-year-old because he's been playing pro ball for so long. Playing in the Olympics too doesn't help. So all of these things considered, is Brandon Ingram really the guy that you really want to bring in?
To be honest, I love the Brandon Ingram idea.
I mean, the guy can't stay healthy.
Yeah, well, that's a trend for the Atlanta Hawks. But at the end of the day, it's an expiring deal. Yeah. And I don't think Brandon Ingram's going to cost next to anything. I think he's got $36 million remaining. You think, in a nutshell, right? You got Clint Capella on the books for a little over $22 million this year. You got
the salaries match.
You got Bogey at 16. So you ship those out. You get what you get. Maybe you get a first rounder. Maybe you get 2 first rounds. Maybe you get a few seconds. I don't know exactly what the market's for those guys. It's not going to be very high. But getting a guy like Brandon Ingram, who, when healthy, can provide that offensive spark. Because you watch this Hawks team right now. I'm sorry, guys. Outside of Trae Young and DeAndre Hunter, there is nothing offensively. I mean, it is brutal.
My boy Ricochet put up 30 last night.
All right, listen. Respect to Ricochet. He absolutely balled out, and hopefully that continues, and he's going to have to be more of a focal point of this offense moving forward. But you're trying to replace Jalen Johnson, a guy like Brandon Ingram, if he can stay healthy, and you're only asking him to stay healthy for 30 games. And it might not be possible. But at the end of the day, at the end of the season, you're just trying to give this team a little bit of hope, a little bit of fun, and maybe, hey, what if it works out way better than you imagined? Maybe you can work something out at the end of the season. You clear money in the future with Bogdanovic, so you're a little more freer this offseason. Obviously, Capella's off the books. So you just kind of you clear things up for the future.
You're cutting the fat.
Yeah.
You're just getting leaner. And I like that.
And you give yourself a little opportunity. I mean, I would be maybe at most, you're talking about the Kings' first-round pick, which might not even be a first-round pick for Brandon Ingram. I think you're probably looking at a couple of second-rounders.
Yeah. So it wouldn't be a 2-team trade. The Pels have no motivation to do that. It would involve
money, getting $36 million off the books.
Bogey and Clint would be matching that salary. So you would get a third team who would want Bogey or Clint or both of them. And the Pels end up just getting picks or maybe some guys that, it doesn't really matter in terms of their salary cap because they want to stay under the threshold. So you'd have to get a third team involved. And there's plenty of teams that would be interested in a veteran big in Clint Capella who gives you a lot of good stuff on the defensive end and on the boards. And Bogey, for a contending team, is exactly what a lot of people are looking for. I know I just kind of trashed him a little bit, but from the Hawks perspective, he's not as valuable as he would be for another competing team per se. So the Suns, the Suns could really use a guy like Bogey. So I like the idea in general of just trimming the fat on this team, getting a little leaner, especially with the salary cap, getting a little flexible in that area. Brandon Ingram isn't a guy. Listen, when he's healthy, bring him on. He's a 25-5 guy. I mean, he's everything you want for the Atlanta Hawks. Like, he can get his own bucket. He doesn't need Trae Young on the court to do his thing. He gives you a little bit of defensive versatility. He can make up for some of the rebounding that you lost with Jalen Johnson. I mean, he is perfect. But again, it's the health thing. The guy's played like 15 games this year.
Yeah, but that's why I think it's perfect on a trial run. You see one if it works, one if he can stay healthy, one what his market's like. There's no attachment to the future in this deal. It's not going to cost a lot. It's worth a little bit of a gamble just to keep this team afloat, right? Because frankly, if they don't make a move to upgrade this roster, this team's not making the playoffs. They're not even going to make the play-in. Like they are that bad offensively. Defensively, they've actually been pretty decent, but offensively, there's just two Trae.
It's not even really. It's the same song and dance without Trae Young on the court. Like with Trae, if Trae could just play 48 minutes every single night, we would be in the conversation for out of the play, and we'd have a top 6 seed if Trae Young could just play. That's just not feasible. So when he leaves the court, we are the worst offensive team in basketball.
Yeah, I mean, and the bench is basically DeAndre Hunter and nothing else. Especially if you're trading Clint Capella and Bogdan Bogdanovic. Like, the bench has just been an absolute dumpster fire with those guys out, which presumably because they're in trade talks. It's been DeAndre Hunter. Like yesterday, he had, I think, 15 points at the half, and the rest of the bench, 4 guys, had 0. They totaled 12 points in the entire game, and they played most of the fourth quarter because we were down by 20. So it is just like it's a brutal look. Like, those guys can't be.
Without Jalen Johnson, I will say the Cavs are an awful matchup for us. Mo Gay was starting last night. It's not a great look for us. But, I think if you're just, talking about the overarching theme of the trade deadline, I love the idea. I'll repeat it for a third time. Is trimming the fat. Let's get lean. I am open to the Brandon Ingram idea of it. He definitely could have a little bit to play for, obviously, with an expiring deal. He's entering free agency. Who knows? Maybe he comes here. Maybe we win a playoff.
Yeah, I mean, whether it's Brandon Ingram, whether it's someone else, I think that's the formula that we're talking about, because the Hawks aren't going to be bona fide sellers because there's absolutely nothing.
No incentive.
There's no incentive for them to go out there. So finding an expiring contract and a player like Brandon Ingram, or maybe a little bit less, but an expiring deal that they don't have to commit any dollars to the future. They rid of Bogey's contract, which is going to hamstring a little bit base. He still has 2 years left on the deal.
And capitalizing on Clint.
Yeah, and capitalizing whatever they can on Clint. So if they come out of this trade deadline with a player that can help them now and be on an expiring deal, and if they can come out with it with somehow maybe a first-round draft pick, I mean, I think you look at Landry Fields and you say, hey, this is another good job well done. We had a lot of questions about him and Kyle Korver because of their youth and not being general managers, first-time general managers, first-time assistant Jim, just out of the league. I mean, these guys we were watching them play a couple years ago. I mean, hell, Kyle Korver was in the All-Star game less than a decade ago for the Hawks. But yeah, I mean, it would be another good off season. Let's see if they can manage another difficult trade deadline this time around.